You probably noticed an extensive and comprehensive supplementation program in your report. And that's because there's a pretty direct path moving from a biomarker into a supplement. For example, if we see your vitamin D is low, we need to bring up your vitamin D. If we see that your iron is off, we need to fix your iron. And so sometimes there are those simple and direct paths. Other times, it's more complicated than that. Additionally, Vitality is really built to target those biomarkers we got in your labs. But that said, there's a lot of other uses of supplementation that can enhance performance outside of things that don't necessarily need to be manipulated or corrected from your physiology. Creatine is probably the best example of that. I can't think of a single case in which a creatine would be used to correct really any blood marker.
Certainly not going to get flagged as a biomarker, and then creatine will be the direct link solution to it.
That said, there is no more supplement on the earth that has more research, that is safe and effective and provides benefits in a number of different areas. And so in this particular video, we want to talk about that side of the equation. What do you need to be thinking about? How should you be thinking about it if you want to integrate supplements more into your program that are outside of what's already come with the stuff we recommended to correct those lab markers?
There's really 3 pieces of framework that you need to have in your mind when selecting supplementation for this reason, so that it is additive to what you want and it is going to support what you're doing here at Vitality. That is, what does the scientific evidence have to say about that supplement? Is that supplement targeting the tissue or energy system you actually want it to target based upon your goals? And lastly, is it safe? So the first one, is the scientific evidence there for that supplement? This is when you're going to be wanting to look for higher quality studies, things like randomized controlled trials, meta-analyses of randomized controlled trials, double-blind placebo-controlled trials in humans, perhaps relevant to the demographic that you're trying to accomplish here, and not a rat study done once in 1967 on something that's adjacent to the compound that you're even doing. These are very important things to question, consider, look into, and even seek out advice on. Because one thing that is sometimes a lot more powerful than science is marketing. Marketing can grab the best of us. And one of the things that you want to empower yourself with is the evidence behind selecting supplementation in a way that's really going to support you.
Yeah, when you're looking at that research and trying to identify, is the evidence actually really strong, you also want to think about things like, are there papers and studies coming from multiple different laboratories, multiple different sciences? When we see the same basic result with the same basic application coming from multiple different sciences, you start to get a really strong confidence that there's a real effect there. Now, just because all the evidence comes from one lab or one scientist doesn't inherently mean it's wrong, but it is less powerful than the opposite example. Some other things you want to pay attention to, basic scientific literacy, like what's the sample size? Were there 3 people in the study? Were there 300? Were they controlling for the dose? Was this a survey about past habits, or did they actually directly intervene on them? Lots of different ways to understand scientific quality, but those are some of the things you should be thinking about.
Up next is this compound you're taking actually targeting the tissue or energy system that you intend to target? A good example here would come from beta-alanine. Beta-alanine is something that has been demonstrated efficacious for anaerobic capacity, so pushing very, very high intensity efforts out beyond 60 seconds of non-stop action. But if you're a high jumper and your event is over in about 5 seconds, or if you're a power lifter and your lift is over in about 3 seconds, then although beta-alanine may have robust literature behind it and is efficacious for, quote, sports performance, it's not beneficial for the high jumper or the power lifter in that scenario. So this is a situation where you have a good supplement that met criteria number 1 with good evidence, but it didn't actually target the tissue or energy system you intended to target for this truly being additive to your program.
Another side of that same equation is it actually detrimental to things you're not paying attention to? There are no free passes in physiology. Something goes on or in your body, it's going to have an effect. And so really our stance typically is unless we have a specific reason to take a supplement, we're probably not going to. If you're in this program, you're already been recommended a moderate amount of supplements as it is. So going above and beyond that, we really think you should have a direct and judicious intention behind that, or have a specific problem you're trying to solve. And that high jump example was a great case. There is very little documented downside to beta-alanine. So up to you. That's your personal philosophy on how you handle supplementation. But for us, we would really say, really think about it. Unless there's direct application there, it may be best to pass for now. My favorite example of this is inflammation. We tend to hear this and think bad and negative, but the reality of it is, this is an incredibly important and necessary process to muscular adaptation, especially in terms of muscular growth. If you are then taking an anti-inflammatory, antioxidant supplement at high concentrations, vitamin C, vitamin E, any other number of potential supplements, they may actually be blunting that signal to growth and therefore reducing your muscle size. This has actually been shown multiple times in science as a real thing that can happen in even moderate or reasonable doses. Back to our point, if we don't have a specific reason and intention for this, really be careful that even if it's not directly benefiting the organ or organ systems that you're after, making sure it's not detrimenting or attenuating benefits and adaptations in other systems as well.
The third and final principle of framework you want to have when selecting supplements is it safe? You want to know if it's safe, you want to know if it's safe for you, and you want to know if it's safe for long-term use. These are very important questions to ask because what you're doing here is adding things to your life to enhance your life. One of the worst things that can happen is if that takes away any health or metric, or perhaps damages a biomarker that you got here at Vitality, perhaps on your next redraw, and you're wondering what happened to this biomarker, but it was from something that came from the outside in that impacted you from the inside out. There's a wild, wild west when it comes to supplementation and regulations and things you need to watch out for. And we did a paper on that recently.
Yes, that's actually open access, which means any of you can download it and read it. And we really looked at the research on what are called adulterated supplements. So these are either mislabeled, intentionally or unintentionally. They come in the wrong dosages, more of the active ingredient than you think or way less. The magnitude here can be multiple. In other words, it can be a factor of 10 up to 1,000x more than you think you're getting or less. And a number of other problems. Adulteration and supplementation is not extremely common, but it is a real thing. And so some of the best practices you can take to reduce your chances of that is getting your supplements from really high quality companies, number one. Any of them that are third-party certified. If you are an athlete, you probably actually want to take an additional step and make sure you're only choosing supplements that are third-party for sport certified, Informed Choice, NSF, or several other of the major companies that do that. Look for those stamps. Just because you have those stamps, it doesn't necessarily mean you're getting perfect amounts of the ingredient, but it's much closer and it's much less likely to have other ingredients in them and contaminants that you don't want. If you choose companies that are not third-party certified, you run that risk. Now again, admittedly, that risk is not incredibly high, especially in America, but in other countries, it can get really, really, really high. And you can see more of the details, the breakdowns by countries in our paper. But the point being, choose really high quality supplements to ensure safety. In addition to that, I also want you to think about which supplements categorically are less likely to cause problems and which ones are more. Things that are pretty innocuous, if you take them and you don't have labs, or you maybe take a higher dose than was recommended in your program, but it's probably not that big a deal. Fish oil, creatine, beta-alanine. You take extra or less than the peer-reviewed publications, probably not going to run into any issues. Supplements that are more of a concern, we've already talked about antioxidants. Anything that's involving your endocrine system or your hormones directly or indirectly. So literally taking hormones, taking prohormones, anything that is involving sleep medications, melatonin, or direct medications on top of that. Minerals, rocks, all that stuff has a pronounced effect in your physiology. water-soluble vitamins, or things that are going to pass through your system really quickly, proteins, amino acids. Really, really hard to cause yourself problems unless the supplement is directly contaminated. Other things, though, like minerals, are actually more likely to cause issues with you, even at reasonable or moderate non-contaminated dosages. Same idea for direct hormones, prohormones, or things in that area, or peptides, sleep medications, melatonin, and other stuff that are necessarily over the counter. They don't require a direct doctor note or slip. You can see them in almost any place, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're a free pass. So really think about these categories. If you're gonna add some stuff on top of what we've given you, make sure they are from those easily processed, low likelihood of causing issue categories. You're gonna play the game with everything else. You really need to be specific and intentional and think carefully about that choice.
You got 3 things to remember. What's the scientific evidence behind it? Is it targeting the tissue or system that you want? And is it safe? If you can check these 3 boxes, it's almost certainly okay to add to your vitality program.